When we discovered our cards were blocked, an unexpected family secret changed everything. Sarah's heart sank as she stared at the debit card reader, its cold, indifferent beep resonating like a death knell. She tried again, her fingers trembling against the plastic. Blocked. The word echoed in her mind, amplifying the reality of her desperation. Each minute she spent in that grocery store became a reminder of the rent due in just 3 days. But today, standing alone with her teenage son Jake, all she could do was sputter an apology. Panic clawed at her throat, tightening like a noose. How would she explain this to him? Would he finally see that being their sole provider had stretched her thin? She knew they were stretched financially. But this? The walls felt like they were closing in. The shimmering light from the fluorescent bulbs overhead turned harsh and unforgiving. The shame of this moment weighed heavily on her, each glance from the cashier feeling like a judgment of failure. Jake looked at her, worry etching his youthful face. She had always prided herself on being the rock, the unwavering support in their small, chaotic world. And now this. What would he think? Would he feel the pressure crushing her? It shouldn't have been like this. Rushing home with the groceries still untouched, Sarah's mind raced. What was she going to do? Her plan had always been simple. Work hard, keep afloat. But she now stood at an abyss, her late mother's medical practice barely scraping by. Her nights were consumed with creating schedules, balancing accounts, as if she could will the practice to thrive through sheer determination. Yet striking walls of frustration stared back at her, a bleakness that crept under her skin like poison. Suddenly, in a moment of pure distraction, Sarah took refuge in the attic. Perhaps there was something up there, dusty relics from a past life that might offer clarity. Black soot crossed her fingers as she rummaged through items. A cracked mirror, expired coupons, an old musty photo album. When it fell open, the musty scent transported her back, flipping through pages of faded smiles until a collection of letters slipped out, yellowed and fragile. As she read her grandfather's words, the shock of their content set her on fire. An ingenious invention? Wealth tarnished by societal prejudice? Anger bubbled as she questioned why this had remained hidden all these years. Did it carry the answers she desperately needed? But as the gravity of her grandfather's legacy began to unfold, so did the resentment toward her estranged father, the man she held responsible for their familial misfortune. The words danced around her, igniting a flickering hope mixed with doubt. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With the clock ticking, Sarah wrestled with emotions that seemed to rise from every angle. Should she reveal this newfound knowledge to Jake? Would he understand? What if she had to confront her father, pull back layers of pain, and lay bare the wounds inflicted by a man long gone from their lives? If her grandfather's invention could alter their future, could it also pave a path to an unexpected reconciliation? The thought paralyzed her with fear. Time slipped through her fingers as she stood at the precipice of a decision that held her family's legacy in its balance. The deeper she dove, the more uncertain her footing became. Would this revelation lead to salvation or condemnation as she clutched at her family's tarnished name? It was too much. Her heart raced, and she felt as though the walls were closing in again. As Sarah leaned against the attic wall, the dust motes swirling in the stale air reminded her of the weight pressing against her chest. Holding the fragile letters in her hands, the words raced through her mind, igniting a sense of urgency that felt as foreign as it was thrilling. This could be the spark she needed to lift her and Jake from their current struggles. But with each possibility came a tide of hesitance. Could she turn the legacy of her grandfather into something more than a story of loss and regret? She placed the letters down gently, the floorboards creaking underfoot as she paced, chewing on her lower lip. The lifetime of being her family's pillar had equipped her with resilience. Yet in this moment, she felt unsteady. The fear of failure twisted in her stomach, and the looming question remained. How could she possibly navigate this journey alone? With trembling hands, Sarah reached for her phone, the sleek device a stark contrast to the dusty relics surrounding her. Maybe it was time to reach out for help. Perhaps a local business group or even an old friend could guide her toward unlocking the inventions mentioned in the letters. Was there a possibility that they could be re-engineered into something profitable? The excitement of options was quickly dampened by the fear of judgment. What if they laughed at her audacity? She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath to steady the thoughts racing like wild horses in her mind. She envisioned Jake's face, how he looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. He believed in her more than she believed in herself. That thought became her anchor as she resolved to step into this uncertainty, eliminating the impulse to wallow. The first step was small but significant. Rekindle connections. Sarah composed a short message to an old college friend who had ventured into entrepreneurship. Her hand hovered over the send button as doubt gnawed at her resolve. What if this friend was too busy? Or worse, what if they'd forgotten her? But stealing her back, Sarah pressed send, immediately feeling a flicker of hope. Days passed, and with every fleeting moment of anxiety, she poured herself into the letters. They detailed not just an invention, but her grandfather's passion. His scientific mindset and dreams felt alive, coursing through her veins as she studied concepts she had never dared to consider. Engineering, business tactics, even marketing. Ideas began stretching themselves across her mind like a spider's web, and unexpectedly, she found herself mapping out plans for a potential prototype. Jake noticed an uncharacteristic spark in her demeanor. One evening, while Sarah sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers, he peeked in, curiosity painted across his features. She caught his eye and beckoned him closer, torn between shielding him from her burdens and inviting him into this new phase of her life. "Want to help?" she asked, an invitation wrapped in both fear and hope. The honesty in her voice lifted the walls of their silent struggles, and to her surprise, Jake grinned, pulling a chair beside her. The night swirled with ideas and sketches, the atmosphere electric with possibilities. Together they dissected the letters, brainstorming how to transform these yellowed pages into something tangible. It felt like magic, a flicker of triumph igniting in their hearts. That one small decision to share her goals took root and began to bloom in unexpected ways. The familiar hum of her phone snapped Sarah from her thoughts, an email alert flashing on the screen. It was from her friend. She opened it with trembling anticipation, the tight knot in her stomach transforming into a cautious eagerness. "Let's meet this weekend," it read. "I'd love to hear what you've been up to." Sarah's heart raced as she realized the meeting could be more than just a social catch-up. It could be an opportunity to seek guidance on how to move forward with her grandfather's legacy. It was time to take a leap that would challenge her to confront the specters of her past and embrace the potential of the future. As she turned to Jake, a flicker of hope reflected in his eyes. Sarah knew that the upcoming weekend would mark a pivotal turning point in their lives. They were no longer merely surviving. They were stepping boldly into a new chapter. The question loomed, however. Would unlocking her grandfather's legacy bring them together as a family? Or would it force her to confront demons better left in the shadows? Sarah woke on Saturday, the sunlight streaming through the curtains like a spotlight on a stage set for revelation. Her heart pounded in anticipation of the meeting with her old friend, Jessica. There was a whisper in her mind, a nagging fear that perhaps she was pursuing a mirage disguised as ambition. Yet, with the letters still illuminating her thoughts, she chided herself for any lingering doubts. This was a tangible opportunity to rewrite her story, not just for herself, but for Jake and their future. After a nervous breakfast, Sarah dressed carefully, choosing a simple yet professional outfit that conveyed both her seriousness and newfound assertiveness. The mirror reflected a determined face, the dark circles under her eyes a testament to the long nights spent poring over her grandfather's enchanting yet labyrinthine ideas. Today wasn't merely a social call. It was a step toward realization. As she drove toward the cafe where they had agreed to meet, self-doubt coiled like a snake in her belly. What if Jessica found her pursuits ridiculous? Would her eyes glaze over in boredom when she shared her plans? Reflecting on the myriad of emotions bubbling beneath her surface, Sarah caught a glimpse of a billboard that read, "Success is a journey, not a destination." The words buzzed through her thoughts, a bittersweet reminder of the hurdles she had already begun to confront. And yet she felt a renewed resolve suffuse her. She would not be a victim of judgment. This was her path to weave. Arriving at the cafe, the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the bitterness of her fears. Jessica sat at a corner table, waving and smiling, a gleaming aura of confidence radiating from her presence. As they exchanged pleasantries, Sarah noted how effortless and fluid Jessica seemed, contrasting sharply with her own tumultuous emotions. "Sarah, it's so good to see you," Jessica exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. "You look great. Tell me, what's been going on?" The moment had arrived, the spotlight flickering on her narrative. Sarah hesitated, then took a deep breath and shared her grandfather's legacy, the letters, and her vision of bringing his inventions to life. As she spoke, inch by inch, she felt the tightness in her chest unwind. This was a chance to breathe life into her ambitions, to dissect her fears while also inviting the potential for collaboration. Jessica listened intently, her brow furrowing in concentration. "That's incredible, Sarah. I had no idea about your grandfather's work. This could really be something big." The affirmation was like a balm to Sarah's vulnerable spirit, yet it was soon followed by a question that cut deeper than expected. "Do you have a plan to bring it to the market? What's your target audience?" Instead of allowing the questions to intimidate her, Sarah felt them challenge her. This was exactly the push she needed. She had immersed herself in ideas and sketches, but had yet to establish clarity in her strategic approach. Well, I'm still figuring that part out," she admitted, feeling the flood of vulnerability again. Jessica leaned back thoughtfully, her fingers drumming on the table. "Look, Sarah, the concept is only half of it. The execution matters just as much, if not more. Let's put together a plan. I can help with connections." Sarah marveled at how quickly things could shift. Each piece of advice coaxed her toward a more structured vision. Yet along with the emerging excitement was a note of hesitation. If she did this, there could be no turning back. This wasn't merely about refining a product. It was about making a commitment to her grandfather's memory and to herself. The conversation soon moved to logistics. Together they sketched a tentative roadmap. Market research, potential partners, and branding. It all seemed so vast, but Sarah found herself energized by the challenge, her earlier hesitance dissipating like morning fog as clarity took its place. As they wrapped up the meeting, Jessica leaned forward, her voice serious, yet encouraging. "You're stronger than you think, Sarah. Remember, every step counts. Don't be afraid to take risks. Challenge yourself beyond comfort. That's how growth happens." Driving home, Sarah felt the weight of possibility settle onto her shoulders. She had plunged into the deep waters of entrepreneurial aspiration, a world teeming with unknowns. The realization sank in. This journey wasn't just about transforming inventions, but about redefining herself along the way. Even as excitement coursed through her, she quietly acknowledged the fear that still clung to her like a persistent shadow. What if the next hurdle overwhelming her was her own doubt? That night, as she and Jake sat together reflecting on the day, a familiar unease returned. There was much to plan, yet Sarah couldn't help but feel a storm brewing ahead. She was diving deeper into not just the legacy of her grandfather, but also the tangled web of her family's past. Was she truly ready for everything she might uncover about her grandfather's legacy? And her own? The stakes were rising with each decision, ready to explode into a reality she wasn't completely prepared for. The dawn of Sunday broke slowly, the sunlight lackadaisically pouring through the window, casting a soft glow across Sarah's cluttered desk. The remnants of last night's revelations loomed large in her mind. Her grandfather's legacy, as much a mystery as it was a potential launching pad, enveloped her in a sense of urgency. Each invention they had discussed, each note she had read, carved a deeper layer into her self-doubt. Sipping her coffee, Sarah's gaze wandered to the letter from her grandfather resting on the table. It bore not just the ink of his ideas, but a palpable sense of responsibility. She was wrestling with the notion of translating his dreams into a reality, while navigating the precarious terrain of her own aspirations. A knock on the door startled her from her thoughts. Jake entered, his expression revealing a hint of concern. "You've been awfully quiet this morning. Want to talk?" The warmth of his presence anchored her. She took a moment, searching for the words to express the tumult swirling within. "I met with Jessica yesterday. We talked about turning the ideas into something tangible, but I feel stuck. What if it's too much? What if I fail?" Jake moved closer, resting his hands on her shoulders, grounding her anxiety with his calm. "You won't know unless you try. But what's holding you back the most?" Diving into her thoughts, Sarah uncovered a truth she hadn't confronted yet. "I guess I'm scared. Scared of what it means to carry this legacy. What if it taints my own identity? What if I disappoint him?" Jake's brow furrowed. "Your grandfather left those ideas in your hands because he believed in you. You're not just his legacy, you're building your own." His words lingered in the air, settling like a gentle reminder that her path was her own to forge. With a tightly woven heart of fear, hope, and tenacity, Sarah placed her mug down and stood up. "I need to get more clarity. I need to dive deeper into what I'm really creating." Determined to dismantle her doubts, Sarah began sketching ideas across the pages of her notebook, letting them flow freely. As she did, the outline of a strategy began to form. She visualized her target audience, the young innovators and curious minds eager for practical yet visionary advancements. The ink on the page soon transformed from unstructured chaos into a coherent plan. That evening, Sarah felt an urgency rising within her, an insistent push that compelled her to dig deeper into her grandfather's history. What had he struggled with? What lessons had he learned from the failures that surely dotted his path? Armed with fresh resolve, she gathered the letters again, flipping through them until a small, faded envelope slipped from between the pages. It seemed out of place, less formal than the others. Her heart raced. Perhaps hidden in that envelope could be a path to understanding not just her grandfather, but her own hesitation. With steady hands, she pried it open. Inside lay several pages of handwritten notes, not about inventions, but rather thoughts on family and the sacrifices made to pursue dreams. Our legacies are as much about the past as they are about the future. One line read, a stark reminder of the balance she needed to strike between honoring her roots and setting her own course. As she absorbed the words, a mix of excitement and trepidation washed over her. Could she honor her grandfather's wishes while simultaneously crafting her own identity? The echo of his handwritten sentiments seemed to affirm that her success was intertwined with the lessons he imparted about resilience and dedication. Determined to make sense of the tangled web of expectations, Sarah leaned into the notes, deciphering each line, keen to unearth the buried truths that might illuminate her next steps. The night drifted into silence, the weight of uncertainty lingering like a specter in the shadows. But as Sarah closed the envelope, she felt embers of conviction sparking within her. Was she finally on the brink of transforming not just her grandfather's legacy but forging her own distinct identity in the process? The clock ticked mercilessly toward midnight, and with every tick, the thrill of the unknown wove its delicate fabric around her. The pieces were coming together, but a nagging doubt whispered, what if the secrets she uncovered truly changed everything? With one last glance at the letters, Sarah took a decisive breath. She was poised on the edge of something monumental. But little did she know, the real test awaited her in the shadows. What would she do when the past finally confronted her? As the sun draped its first bright rays across her desk, pushing the shadows into a retreat, Sarah felt a mix of anticipation and dread blossom within her. The warmth of the light hinted at clarity, but her thoughts remained tangled. The letter from her grandfather lay silently at her side, urging her forward. She traced her fingers over its edges, trying to absorb its weight and significance. With renewed determination, she knew she had to delve deeper into her grandfather's experiences. His notes held undeniable wisdom. There was a lesson in every failed invention and each hardship he faced. They were the touchstones of rigor, demonstrating that greatness often arose from the dust of failure. But how could she translate this into her own journey? What failures, sacrifices, or revelations had she yet to face? Jake's presence still lingered in her thoughts, and she could almost hear the cadence of his voice pushing her beyond her fears. Drawing in a deep breath, she resolved to face her anxieties head-on, setting her sights on what lay ahead. Her notebook, each page filled with a raw combination of sketches and half-formed ideas, beckoned her back. Instead of picking up where she had left off, Sarah decided to confront the core of her doubts. What if I'm not good enough? She whispered to the empty room. The silence that followed seemed to mock her, a reminder of the standards she believed she needed to meet. Yet, as she sat there, she recognized something profound. Her insecurities were whispers of growth, a call to action rather than retreat. She opened a new page and began to explore the narrative of her grandfather's journey. She recalled stories of his struggles, the late nights spent in his workshop, the joy of occasional breakthroughs tempered by inevitable failures. She wrote down the risks he took, the moments of vulnerability that had shaped him. This exercise was more than mere reflection. It became a revelation. With every stroke of her pen, she found herself peering deeply into both the success and the scars he bore. Perhaps success was ultimately about embracing imperfection. This realization ignited a flicker of hope within her. When her phone buzzed, jolting her back to the present, she glanced down to see a message from Jessica. "Excited for our meeting tomorrow. We'll brainstorm ideas together." A knot of apprehension formed in her stomach. The upcoming meeting with Jessica loomed large. Would she be ready to present her thoughts? Could she hold her ground, knowing that her ideas were tethered to a legacy? Before she could stew in uncertainty, she picked up her laptop and began researching potential investors. As names popped up on the screen, individuals who had believed in burgeoning minds like hers, she recognized a pattern. They all shared one key quality: resilience. They had endured hardships and pushed through the doubts. Perhaps she could channel that same spirit. Hours ticked by unnoticed as Sarah compiled her thoughts, weaving her grandfather's principles into a narrative that appeared increasingly autobiographical. Each detail drew her closer to understanding not only who he was, but who she could become. Through his struggles, she began carving a path of her own. But as night crept in, bringing with it shadows and whispers of uncertainty, Sarah felt the slip of resolution. Could I actually be bold enough to present my work as my own? She questioned. The fear of alienating the ghost of her grandfather's legacy tugged at her heart. What if by crafting her future, she unwittingly severed ties with the past? This internal conflict set her pulse racing. Her phone buzzed again, this time from Jake. Feeling the energy shift? Ready to tackle the unknown? His mere words grounded her. She took a moment to reflect, then began to type a response, but instead paused, her gaze lost in thought. As she contemplated the delicate balance of innovation versus tradition, her phone rang. It was Jessica, an unexpected call. "Sarah!" Jessica's voice burst through with palpable excitement. "You won't believe what I found out about our potential investor. It's someone who knew your grandfather." The world around Sarah shrank as the implications unfurled before her. Would this revelation help her better understand the tether between her past and future? With questions buzzing in her mind, she didn't know that this call would ultimately lead her toward an unexpected confrontation with her grandfather's influence. With the weight of choice pressing down, Sarah steadied herself. The road ahead promised hurdles that could redefine everything she thought she knew. The call ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving Sarah in stunned silence. Her heart raced, propelled by the implications of Jessica's news. Someone who knew her grandfather. Instantly, a flurry of questions cascaded through her mind. Was this investor someone who respected her grandfather's legacy? Would he recognize her as more than just the shadow of the man behind the inventions? She couldn't shake the feeling that this was a potential turning point, both professionally and personally. Eyes darting between her laptop and the cluttered desk, scattered with her grandfather's legacy, she attempted to refocus. This wasn't merely about her emerging career. This was also about honoring her grandfather's legacy in a way that felt authentic to her. Inspired yet anxious, she flipped her notebook open to the page filled with her grandfather's stories and her evolving thoughts, as if seeking some guidance from his past. With steady hands, she began outlining the points she wanted to share in the meeting tomorrow. Each bullet was a blend of her grandfather's innovations and her own burgeoning ideas, reflecting a synthesis of old and new. Yet the self-doubt settled in, worming its way through her resolve. What if these ideas weren't enough? In that moment, self-criticism felt like an unwelcome companion, taunting her with questions she had thought she'd begun to conquer. Tugging at her thoughts was a memory of her grandfather sitting at the workbench late at night, eyebrows knitted in concentration as he sculpted visions out of raw materials. "It's not just about the product, Sarah," he once said. "It's about the story behind it. Always remember that." The weight of his words seemed both comforting and suffocating. Could she embody that philosophy while remaining true to herself? Memories of those long nights, filled with flashes of inspiration juxtaposed with the despair of failure, nudged her forward. They served as a reminder that her grandfather had not succeeded in isolation. He had enlisted help and advice from many, each connection and conversation paving the way to his eventual successes. Or perhaps, enlightening failures. It was time to carve her path in a similar way. Realizing she needed to channel her anxiety into something productive, she reached out to her old mentor, Marcus, someone she knew would provide valuable insight. He had always encouraged her to view her insecurities as stepping stones, rather than barriers. Typing quickly, she sent him a text, asking if he could meet today. His reply came swiftly. "Let's catch up before the meeting. I'll bring coffee." A small smile crept onto Sarah's face. It felt reassuring to lean on someone with whom she had built such a nurturing professional bond. As she prepared for the meeting, the swirl of conflicting emotions, excitement, doubt, anticipation, all piled up. She continued to sketch and take notes, using her grandfather's challenging experiences as fuel. Focusing on her story, she began to see a connection emerging within her own life, how it intertwined with his legacy. Days later, as she walked into the cafe where she had arranged to meet Marcus, she noticed how her palms felt clammy and her heart thudded uncomfortably. The shadows of doubt tickled her thoughts again. What if Marcus didn't think her ideas were viable? "Hey, you look deep in thought," Marcus commented as he waved her over to a table. As she settled in, caffeine brewing around the two of them, he leaned in inquisitively. "What's on your mind?" As she began to unpack her ideas and the implications of the potential investor, Sarah stopped short, uncertain if she could articulate the personal weight layered within her professional struggles. Would he grasp the emotional complexity of the legacy she was trying to build? But she took a deep breath, recalling her grandfather's legacy, and finally shared her ambitions. "Every invention has a story, but I'm scared I won't do it justice." Marcus listened intently, his eyes narrowing in thought. Then, he leaned back thoughtfully. "You need to realize that sharing your own story isn't about eliminating legacy. It's about weaving your story with his. You're not stepping on sacred ground, but reclaiming it." The internal conflict kept simmering, but his words sparked something in her. It was about bringing her unique viewpoint to the forefront, not overshadowing the past, but illuminating its significance through her own lens. As the conversation deepened, Sarah felt fragments of uncertainty begin to realign. Maybe facing the looming meeting wouldn't be a matter of proving herself, but a chance to embrace a shared narrative. But just as optimism began to settle in, Marcus dropped another unexpected insight. "You know, sometimes family secrets can reshape everything you thought you knew." His words hung in the air, echoing a new, uncharted territory that beckoned her onward. What hidden truths about her grandfather could there still be? As Sarah stepped back into her thoughts laden with newfound determination, the stakes felt recalibrated. Secrets lingered at the edges of her awareness, and each revelation could be pivotal to her path. The next phase of her journey might not just be about her professional ascent, but about unraveling a complicated familial legacy. Little did she know, the next twist awaited just behind the door marked "Family Secrets." The atmosphere inside the cafe buzzed with the low murmur of conversations and the warm aroma of freshly brewed coffee, yet Sarah felt a chill creeping into her thoughts. The weight of Marcus's unexpected words hovered, demanding her attention. She fidgeted with her napkin, running the fabric between her fingers as fragmented images of her grandfather danced in her mind. Brilliant, flawed, yet magnificent. "Marcus," she began, her voice steady but hesitant. "What kind of secrets could there possibly be? I thought I knew everything there was to know about him." The question burrowed deep, revealing not just her curiosity, but an innate fear of uncovering truths that could shatter her idealized memories. Marcus took a thoughtful sip of his coffee. "Sometimes the histories we inherit come with shadows, Sarah. Sometimes they hide the intricacies of who they were, who we are meant to become." With those words, Sarah felt an unsettling knot of fear and excitement twist in her stomach. She had spent months trying to carve her own space in the vast legacy of her grandfather's work, yet the prospect of digging deeper into unknown histories intimidated her. What if the truth revealed a different man than the one she had idolized? Pushing back her doubts, she refocused, leaning into the conversation. "How do I even begin to approach this? I mean, isn't acknowledging his potential shortcomings just going to undermine everything I'm trying to do?" "Absolutely not," Marcus said firmly. "Understanding his flaws could offer you wisdom, insight you need as you step into his shoes. Building upon a legacy is delicate work. It needs to be grounded in authenticity. Addressing those shadows doesn't dim the light, but adds depth to it." A dim spark ignited in her, merging determination with clarity. The meeting with the potential investor was looming, And if her story was to resonate beyond the echo of her grandfather's, she would need to embrace not only his triumphs, but his challenges. As she exchanged thoughts with Marcus, the structure of her pitch began to crystallize in her mind. She envisioned her refined ideas not merely as a collection of products, but as a narrative interwoven with the complexity of human experience. Her grandfather's experiences included. By embedding vulnerability into her story, she could reveal real passion and authenticity. "Okay, I think I see it now," she said, her voice gaining strength. "It's about illustrating how we navigate innovation and failure together as a family. How he made mistakes and learned from them, allowing me space to explore my identity in his world. It's not just about nostalgia. It's about collaboration across generations." "Exactly," Marcus affirmed, a fire igniting in his eyes. "You're channeling an intergenerational narrative that speaks to evolution. The way you approach this will define not just the pitch, but your entire role moving forward." The words resonated deeply, instilling within Sarah an invigorating sense of purpose. She sensed the narrative beginning to shift. It was no longer just about living in her grandfather's shadow. It was about standing tall in the light he cast and illuminating her own path. However, as she claimed the narrative for her own, the persistent whisper of untold family secrets clawed at her subconscious. With every moment that passed, the anticipation of what lay beneath her grandfather's immaculate legacy swelled and nagged for her attention. What stories had he buried, and how would they impact her? As they wrapped up their conversation, the implications of approaching the potential investor hung heavy on her mind. The stakes were becoming increasingly personal, distilling her ambition into something more profound. "Sarah," Marcus offered, seeming to peer into the layers of her internal struggle. "You have a choice ahead. Whether to sail comfortably on the surface, or dive into those depths where real treasures are found. But also where shadows lurk." In that moment, Sarah felt the weight of the crossroads she faced. She could choose the safe route, echoing the narrative others expected. Safe, unchallenging, predictable. But was that her legacy to uphold? As she rose from the table, determination coursed through her. The meeting was merely a few hours away, and she felt ready to present not just a tribute to her grandfather, but an authentic representation of her essence as well. But just as she turned to leave, Marcus added one last note. "Remember, sometimes it takes facing family secrets to find clarity. You must decide if you're prepared for that kind of discovery before you step forward." The enormity of that statement loomed large in her mind, a poignant reminder that moving forward may indeed disturb the depths she'd kept unexamined. As she stepped into the sunlight, the world felt charged with possibilities. Yet the haunting call of hidden truths began to echo within her. Could she piece together the narrative of her grandfather without crumbling under the weight of new discoveries? The door to her own journey seemed ajar, ready to reveal the complexities waiting in the shadows. And she could feel, ever so gently, that these revelations would not only influence the pitch, but potentially reshape her entire understanding of who she was destined to become. As Sarah walked away from the cafe, the city buzzed around her, an exhilarating cacophony that mirrored the tumult within. The sun hung high, casting light on the busy streets, and she took a deep breath, absorbing the warmth on her skin. Yet beneath the surface, her mind raced with a whirlwind of thoughts. Marcus's words echoed. Sometimes it takes facing family secrets to find clarity. Was she ready to confront whatever specter lay hidden in her grandfather's legacy? The prospect was daunting, yet an undeniable pull inspired a blend of fear and exhilaration. She had spent too long living in someone else's narrative, emulating the man her grandfather had been. Perhaps now was the time to step beyond those confines, to confront the shadows she had avoided. As she approached her office, bouncing the ideas of her pitch in her mind, momentum surged through her. The image of her grandfather flashed, his striking smile, the warmth of his embrace. and she felt a sharp pang of longing mixed with an impenetrable resolve. Wasn't it his flaws, as Marcus suggested, that had shaped the legacy she now sought to redefine? They could serve not only as a foundation but also as a compass guiding her journey. Seated at her desk, she opened her laptop and began to craft her pitch. Her heart raced as she built a bridge between past and present, stitching together stories of aspiration, innovation, and, crucially, the inevitable stumbling blocks. "Families learn together," she typed. "We grow together through triumphs and failures." With each word, she began to sense the weight of latent strengths emerging, but a nagging doubt lurked in the corners of her mind. What if she stumbled upon information that contravened her cherished memories? Could she reconcile her admiration for her grandfather with the reality of his imperfections? The idea made her stomach churn, yet a thrill traced its way up her spine. Perhaps the unvarnished truth would replace nostalgia with something deeper, a human connection laden with authenticity. A knock at the door jolted her from her thoughts. It was Jenna, her confidant and motherly cheerleader at the office. "Hey, I just wanted to check in on you before you head into that meeting. How's the pitch shaping up?" "Good," Sarah replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Actually, I've changed my approach a bit. I want to include a more personal angle, focus on the journey rather than just the successes." "Brilliant idea. I think people appreciate vulnerability," Jenna encouraged, but Sarah could sense a pivot in her friend's expression, a flicker of concern. "But are you okay?" "Yeah, it's just—" Sarah hesitated, weighing the gravity of her feelings against the food she'd expected to share. "I might be digging into some family history that's not too pretty. I didn't realize the impact this would have. It's unsettling. Truth has power. Just be careful not to let it derail you," Jenna warned gently, her empathy palpable. "You have to remember your purpose in all this." As Jenna's words settled, Sarah faced a turning point. She had long lived in the comfort of knowing her grandfather as an inspiring figure, a pillar of her ambition. But if she found her on the truth, would her drive diminish? Or could it elevate her, granting her a different lens through which to explore her own identity? The office clock ticked steadily. The meeting time loomed closer. With every passing second, she understood that she had to embrace this challenge. It was time to anchor her narrative in reality, and perhaps one more hidden truth might flicker to life. She glanced down at her notebook, pausing to absorb the urgency of her decision. What if unveiling these family secrets could not only enrich her pitch, but also genuinely connect her with the audience across the boardroom table, inviting them to share in her familial journey? Taking a deep breath, she cleared her mind, ready to infuse her raw emotions into the pitch. But would the truths unearthed ultimately propel her forward, or would they ensnare her, anchoring her in the depths of uncertainty? The door opened, and the investor walked in, a figure of expectation and potential judgment. Sarah stood, heart pounding and pulse racing as she prepared to confront not only the audience awaiting her narrative, but the darker facets of her legacy lingering in the shadows. Would embracing these hidden elements illuminate her path, or would they diminish the very essence of her grandfather's legacy she was striving to honor? The moment of revelation was upon her, and she felt that the real journey was just beginning. As Sarah faced the investor, the air thickened with an electric anticipation. The man, with his steely gaze and perfectly tailored suit, represented everything she feared. His presence was a reminder of the stakes at hand. Her sense of self and the legacy she was eager to redefine hung in the balance. "Sarah, I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas," he said, settling into his chair. Her heart raced, not merely from nerves but with an overwhelming need for affirmation. Could her journey through family secrets find resonance in this business landscape? She cleared her throat, determined to project confidence. "Thank you for this opportunity," Today, I want to share not just a business proposal, but a story. One that intertwines my professional aspirations with my family's history. As she began to talk, her voice steadied. The words flowed as she painted the picture of her grandfather, balancing his illustrious achievements with his humanity. He was a visionary, yes, but a flawed one too, she admitted. He taught me that success isn't solely defined by triumph, but also by the lessons woven through adversity. The lines on the investor's face softened slightly. His intrigue piqued. Yet, a flicker of doubt sparked in her mind. Was she being too transparent? Would revealing this vulnerability undermine her credibility? Nonetheless, she pressed on, driven by an urgency to connect, not just sell. I discovered that families often carry unspeakable truths, she continued, choosing her words carefully. My grandfather had a troubled relationship with his brother, one that was pivotal to his journey. It took years of estrangement before they reconciled, and this experience shaped his leadership style profoundly. To Sarah's surprise, the investor leaned forward, his expression shifting from skepticism to genuine interest. And you're suggesting that this familial strife plays a role in how you envision your venture? Yes, she replied, emboldened. I believe it gives me a unique perspective, one that prioritizes not just corporate success, but the health of relationships within our teams. My aim is to foster an environment where stories and struggles are valued, where discussing failure is as important as celebrating success. The more she spoke, the more in tune she felt with her message, with the essence of her aspirations. Yet a voice inside her tugged at her. Was she ready to fully embrace her grandfather's flaws? Could she confront the label of failure that had long tainted her perception of family? With every shared experience, she felt a sense of liberation from simply replicating his legacy to actively defining it on her own terms. As the meeting progressed, questions began to surface. If you uncover more truths about your grandfather's legacy, and if they don't align with the image you've constructed, how will you handle that? What if the revelations you seek challenge your own goals? The question struck like lightning, illuminating the doubts that draped her spirit. What would she do if the truths revealed shadows deeper than she had anticipated? Confronting those specters was inevitable. Yet would unraveling them strengthen her resolve or cripple it? I think, she answered slowly, that knowledge is empowering. Whatever I uncover, I choose to lean in, to understand rather than recoil. My grandfather's imperfections don't diminish his impact. They make him real. As she spoke, the investor nodded, the spark of agreement shining in his eyes. Sarah sensed that she was not just making a pitch. She was sharing a philosophy built on resilience and authenticity. The meeting culminated with the investor expressing a desire to explore her narrative further, intrigued by her passion and insight. But as the final words hung in the air, Sarah felt a ripple of uncertainty beneath her triumph. While she had risen to the challenge, what awaited her in her personal exploration? As she left the boardroom, the weight of her grandfather's legacy felt heavier, yet exhilarating. She realized that the deeper her dive into her family history, the more complicated her identity would become. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across her path, she felt the first stirrings of resolve mingled with fear. Descending into the darkness of her past promised to be the hardest of journeys. A journey that would demand she confront her own fragility amidst the chaos of discovery. With a clenched fist around her notebook, a sense of determination surged within her. Tomorrow she would take the first step toward unearthing the truth. Could she ultimately turn these revelations into a source of empowerment? Or would they leave her feeling even more adrift? The thought lingered in her mind as she stepped out into the twilight. The moment of faithful uncertainty was about to unfold. What buried treasure awaited her in the shadows? The next morning dawned with a crisp intensity that invigorated Sarah. The sunlight cascaded through her window, fighting against the shadows of doubt that had once clouded her vision. After her successful meeting with the investor, she understood more than ever that taking ownership of family secrets was crucial to her growth. Today was the day she would explore her grandfather's past, and she felt a blend of excitement and trepidation coursing through her. Armed with her notebook and the fading letters, Sarah decided to visit the attic once more, the space where everything had begun. This time it felt less like an expedition into the past and more like an embarkation into her future. She had previously discovered letters laden with family secrets. Now she needed to confront them head-on. Each step up to the attic felt momentous, a bridge between the woman she had been and the entrepreneur she was becoming. As she rummaged through the dusty boxes, she stumbled upon another envelope, one she hadn't noticed before. It was labeled, "To my family." Her heart raced. There was an urgency in her eagerness to untie the ribbon binding it shut. Within lay a letter from her grandfather addressed not only to her, but to the entire family. Taking a deep breath to steady the tremors of anticipation, Sarah unfolded the letter. His familiar handwriting danced across the page, speaking directly to the heart of what it meant to be a part of her lineage. There will come a time when the weight of our past burdens you. Know that you are not alone. It's in confronting our truths that we find the strength to rise. Tears pricked her eyes, not of sorrow, but of clarity. Her grandfather acknowledged the struggle of carrying family burdens. It was an empowering confirmation that she was entitled to seek her own truth, however challenging it may be. She weighed the choice before her, to shy away from the unresolved fragments of their family history, or to embrace them. The decision crystallized within her. She would confront the specters of her grandfather's past. This was not merely about the inventions, but about understanding the man behind them, witnessing the lessons he had inevitably learned through his mistakes and challenges. Each obstacle he faced had the potential to forge her own path, not as the bearer of his legacy, but as an architect of her own. With renewed vigor, she crafted a plan to trace her grandfather's steps. By reaching out to old family friends and colleagues who might shed light on his experiences, she would unearth stories that had long since faded. This approach would strengthen her pitch by infusing it with authenticity. But more importantly, it would demystify the man whose shadow she had walked in for far too long. Emboldened by this newfound purpose, she spent the day conducting interviews, collecting anecdotes, and absorbing narratives of resilience and struggle. Each story unfolded like a thread that she could weave into her present-day vision, a tapestry of family complexity, unity, and inspiration. As night fell, Sarah returned home, invigorated and solemnly reflective. While the tales she had gathered revealed both triumphs and disappointments, they also presented her with an undeniable sense of belonging. She was part of a lineage that had persevered through adversity and had learned from missteps. She understood that her journey was not one of replication, but of innovation, taking the legacy left behind and reinterpreting it through her lens. In the days that followed, as she continued her outreach, a sense of solid confidence settled into her bones. She was no longer merely an extension of her grandfather. She was actively charting her own destiny, one where the honesty of family history illustrated her capabilities. Equipped with these stories and insights, she returned to the investor's office, not simply to present her pitch, but to share a narrative, a living testament to the intertwined nature of family, innovation, and resilience. Her voice rang with authority as she spoke, not only of her grandfather's inventions, but of the tapestry of struggles that illuminated their lessons. Just as my grandfather faced challenges that shaped his legacy, she articulated, I too am ready to embrace the complexity of my own path. This venture is not solely about a product, but about fostering an environment where innovation meets integrity, where family secrets become sources of strength rather than dread. As her presentation neared its conclusion, she sensed an unanticipated shift in the room. The investor leaned closer, engaged and intrigued. The stories she unfolded were not just hers. They were theirs, real, raw, and compelling. Days later, the investor reached out. A partnership was on the table, ready to engage with the depth of Sarah's vision. And it was in this moment of recognition that Sarah stood proud, validated not only for her professional acumen, but for embracing the essence of her familial legacy. She had come full circle, from a woman constrained by financial burdens to a leader well-versed in the intricacies of her family's history. This journey had culminated in a profound personal achievement. Sarah had confronted her past, molded it into a source of empowerment, and established herself in her own right. There was no longer the need for the shadows of doubt to loom in the corners of her journey. She emerged from this experience steady and resolute, neither entirely her grandfather's shadow, nor simply her own. The convergence of both identities had forged a new, undeniable force. Sarah, architect of her future, holding the light firmly in her hands. She had not only rewritten her family narrative, but had transformed it into her own story of triumph. Now was the moment for you to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is crucial. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. This is the moment to show your support for stories of personal transformation and overcoming adversity. Don't wait even one more second.